All right, in this video, we are going to work through the following problem. It says write a class that performs the following actions. So prompt the user to enter a length in inches as an integer, then convert the length from inches to centimeters, then print the results. It says the message should show both the values for inches and centimeters. The value for centimeters should be rounded to 3 decimal places. Okay, so start a new project, Java project. I'm going to call mine inches to centimeters project. All right, and then click next, uncheck this, create module info.java. All right, so that'll give us a new project, and then inside that project put a class. For package, I'm just going to use application. Any name that you want here, just about is fine for right now. Okay, and then the name of the class, inches to centimeters. And then I want this class to have a main method. So that will set that up for you. Again, I would make sure that your other projects are closed. Then you should be able to run this straight away. Okay. And I am going to cut and paste this. Right in here so we can just see the problem without having to flip back and forth. Okay, and you can just use a paragraph comment to comment that out. All right, so like a lot of problems at the beginning of this class, it follows the same sort of pattern, and that is get some input from the user, then process, right? You make some calculations, and then output, input, process, output. All right. All right, so for the input, we need the user to enter a length in inches. So let's do that, and I am going to use a scanner. So I'll need the import statement up at the top for scanner. And then I will need to create a new scanner object. So do that. All right, test that out. Looks fine so far. All right, so we're going to prompt the user. So and let me switch to the US keyboard. All right, so enter a length in inches. All right, so you're telling the user what to do, right? Otherwise, they're just going to be sitting there looking at the screen, wondering, hey, what do I do next? All right. All right, now what we need to do is to get the input from the user, and it says as an integer. Okay, so that means we are going to use the scanner object, right, to read what the user types in, and then we are going to store that as a variable in our program so that we can use it later on in the program. Okay, and it says as an integer, so in Java that would be an int, right? And give it a name, inches. All right, and then what I'm going to do is use the scanner object. I just called mine in. You can call it whatever you want. And since the user is supposed to be entering an int, right, then I am going to use next int, which is a method in the scanner class that reads an integer value in. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here is telling Java, hey, go look at this scanner object that I created. The dot basically means look inside that object. Inside that object, you will find a method called nextInt, right? And that nextInt method, right, will look into the scanner object and fish out whatever integer that the user typed in. All right, so let's run that and just verify that it's going all right. Okay, so that looks okay. One thing about this is that if the user types in, say, something that should not a number, so I typed in some letters, something that's not an int, you will get this exception thrown, which is basically an error. So don't worry too much about that. For the time being, right, let's just assume that the user is perfect and types in, you know, things exactly like they're supposed to. That's hardly ever the case in reality, right? But that will make our programs much more complicated. So for right now, just assume that the user does what they're supposed to do, okay? Okay, so this is really the input part, right, is done. Here, we're getting input from the user. And also, too, you might, if you're not aware, like when you're running this in Eclipse, like if you type the number here, okay, if you just type it, will go to the right place. All right, I'm not used to that at all. I usually am using a different IDE, integrated development environment, so I just wanted to test that out. I do use Eclipse for certain classes, but most of the time I'm using another one. Okay. So everything looks good. We have the input part down, right? So this bullet point here is done. We did everything that we need to do for part number 1. All right, next up is part number 2. It says convert the length from inches to centimeters, okay? So I'm going to do a little math, right? And then I'm going to save the results of that in a variable again so I can use it later on in my program. All right, so centimeters is obviously going to be a number, right? So the main choices for numeric data are int, which is for whole numbers, right? And then double, which is for decimal numbers. The conversion factor for, and I don't expect you to know that, but there's 2.54 centimeters, right, in 1 inch. So we would be multiplying whatever the inches are by 2.54. All right, that's a decimal number, so therefore inches, or the value for centimeters, is most likely going to come out to be a decimal number. So that says that we should use double for that, okay? So I'm going to make a new variable called centimeters, all right? And then over on the right-hand side of the assignment statement, on the right-hand side of the equals, I am going to put the calculations, which is 2.54 times centimeters, like so, or inches rather, sorry. Okay, and so that is the math, right? Take whatever value of inches and times it by 2.54. That's going to give you the length in centimeters, and then we have that saved. And so again, test that out, make sure everything's going all right. All right, so far so good. All right, and that is part number 2. We have converted the length, right, to centimeters. All right, now we want to print the results, okay? So normally we've been using system.out.print or system.out.println, right? But if you notice here, it says they want the value rounded for, the value for centimeters should be rounded to 3 decimal places, okay? So that means that we are going to use, or need to use, printf, which is formatted print, okay? When you use printf, right, what you need to do is put the message in here, okay, under the first part. There's going to be 2 things. The message, which it shows as format here, and then args over here. So in this, right, what you would do is type the message that you want users to see, okay? So what I want users to see, right, is a message like blank inches is equal to blank, and where the blanks are, I'm just going to put underscores like this for right now and show you. Blank inches is equal to blank centimeters. Okay. All right, so now, and then what I want to do is whatever value that the user types in for inches, I want that to go into this first blank, and then this calculated value for centimeters, I want to go into this second blank right here, okay? And so what I need to do is, these blanks look fine to humans, right? But Java doesn't know, what this is going to be, okay? So if you run this right now, I'll probably have to type something here. I don't know if that'll go or not. Let's see. Yeah, that goes. So what we see here are actual blanks, right? So you've got to write the blanks in a way that Java will recognize, and that's with a percent sign. So if you put a percent sign like this, followed by a control character right here, and the character that you're going to follow the percent sign by is going to depend on what type the variable is that you want to put there, okay? So this variable that I want to go in this first blank is inches, right? And inches is type int. All right, and now the control character that has to go after the percent sign, if it's an int, is a D. Okay? Now you might say a D, why is it a D for int? Shouldn't it be D for double? Right? And that would make a lot of sense, but these control characters are way older than Java, by about 20 years older than Java. They come from another language, right? C. And so that's kind of what we're stuck with, okay? So it's D. D stands for decimal integer in the older language, okay? So that's one kind of what we're used to. All right, if we try to run this, we're going to see it's not going to give us probably the results that we want. Okay, so you can kind of see it. I'm glad it didn't crash, but right here we had a null, right, to value, and you can see it put that null in that first blank. So Java recognizes this as being a blank, right? And so then it stuck this null value in there. That's not what we want in there. What we want is the value for inches. Okay. All right, so now when we run this, you can see it puts the number that the user types in that spot. Like so. Okay. All right. If you happen to use the wrong one, let's say you used F, which is the wrong one for the. Actually, that might actually work, but. Let's see. Just testing that out. Oops. Yeah. So if you use the wrong one, it will crash, and you'll get this illegal format conversion exception. Okay, that means you're using the wrong format specifier down here. Okay, so it's D for int. All right, so go ahead. What? Gotcha. All right. So you can see that's back to working now. All right, so now the next thing we have to do is figure out this other blank over here, right? And so again, that blank, for the blank that makes sense to Java, is a percent sign followed by a format specifier, a control character, whatever you want to call it. And in this case, we want to put the value for centimeters in that blank, right? And so we would have to look at the type. Centimeters is type double, right? And for type double, it should be F. So again, you might say F for double. How does that make any sense, right? But again, it's that F stands for floating point, right? Which was the name for double type. It's a collective name for like data types that store decimals. Okay. All right, and so that's going to make sense for Java, and then we have to tell Java what we will put in that blank. Okay, so in this case it's centimeters. Line's getting a little long, so I'm gonna make it split down to this line right here, so it's easier to read. Okay, so now let's test that out. Let's just do something really easy, like 1 inch. All right, and you can see it says 1 inches. Don't worry about the grammar for right now. We could fix that if we wanted to, but we'll just wait until later. So 1 inches is equal to 2.54, and you can see I get a lot of decimal places right here. So that's fine. You can see it did what we wanted it to do, right? It converted it. So if we type in, let's do 10, right? 10 inches would be 25.4 centimeters, okay? All right. So it looks good. And now the only other thing, right? We have a message that displays the values for inches and centimeters. The only thing we don't have, right, is we don't have the value for centimeters rounded to 3 decimal places. Okay, so but that is the whole reason why we used printf. When you use printf, you can completely control how these characters look, okay, and how they're formatted. So what you want to do, if you want to format something to 3 decimal places, you would just go to your blank here, to your format specifier, and then in between the percent and the F, right, then you would put a point followed by a 3 in between there to round the decimal place. And there's lots of other things you could do as well to control how that looks. So now when I run this, you can see it's now rounded to 3 decimal places, which is what we want. One other thing about printf is that printf doesn't go to the next line like println does. So if you want your statement to go to the next line, otherwise it might run some lines together, you would put a slash in, or when you're using printf, you can also do a %n, which they say is a little bit better, but it will run on, it will work correctly on more platforms, but that's pretty much it, and so this is how printf works.